while Lydia and Gramps each had their own rooms. Gramps privately referred to the three women as the Willow Bluff widows. They were constantly trying to outdo each other in getting Gramps' attention. Harriet cooked and baked, Tilly played a mean game of cribbage and poker, while Lydia knitted him anything from hats to sweaters. Despite all the female attention, he'd privately confided to her that no one could replace Amelia, his late, beloved wife of 55 years. Granny had been gone for 2 years now, but Gramps insisted he'd never love anyone else, no matter how hard the Willow Bluff widows tried to convince him otherwise.
Allie!
Gramps didn't get up from his seat at the table, but glanced at her with a smile. He wore his usual attire of khaki slacks and a short-sleeved blue button-down shirt, with a white t-shirt underneath. In the winter, the short-sleeved shirts would be replaced with long-sleeved flannels. But never once in her entire life had she seen Gramps wearing blue jeans.
I'm glad you stopped by.
Always for you, Gramps. She crossed over to squeeze his shoulders in a hug, pressing a kiss to the top of his military-cut silver hair. I brought brownies. I'll take those. Harriet whisked the container away, and Allie wondered if the widow might toss them in the garbage rather than serve them to Gramps. We'll have the apple crisp for dessert tonight, Oscar, and save the brownies for tomorrow.
Sure, Harriet.
Gramps winked at Allie, and she knew that was his way of saying he'd have both a brownie and an apple crisp for dessert. He had a crazy sweet tooth, which she'd inherited. But unlike herself, Gramps never seemed to gain an ounce. Her grandfather was tall, about 6 feet in his prime, but having lost an inch or so along the way, with a lean frame and a handsomeness that couldn't be denied. At 78, he'd been the picture of health until he'd slipped and fallen on a patch of ice, breaking his hip. After his surgery in April and a stay at the rehab facility through May, Gramps had ended up here, at the Willow Bluff Legacy House, as his doctors didn't want him left alone for any length of time. Gramps considered this move a temporary solution, but Allie suspected it was likely permanent. Even if Gramps didn't decide to marry one of the widows, and in her opinion the jury was still out on that, her schedule at the veterinary clinic was too unpredictable for her to care for him the way the widows could. Plus, she lived in an upper-level apartment, and the stairs would be impossible for him to navigate. Who was that guy you were yelling at? Allie swept her gaze over the 4 retirees. What did he want?
Nothing important.
Gramps waved a hand, downplaying the interaction. We're just fine. Nothing for you to worry about, dear, Harriet assured her. Lydia and Tilly just glanced at each other without saying a word.
Let's go into the living room.
Gramps reached for his despised walker. Knowing Gramps couldn't be rushed into telling the story, she helped him stand, then followed him into the living area. The 3 widows whispered in the kitchen, no doubt bickering over who was going to do what for Gramps once Allie was gone. Gramps gingerly eased down onto the sofa.
You're a sight for sore eyes, young lady.
I told you I'd come by this afternoon. She dropped onto the sofa beside him. Unfortunately, I can't stay too long. I have an appointment at 5:30.
A client?
Gramps' blue eyes twinkled.
That's good news.
Yes. She raked a hand through her dark, curly hair that was constantly springing out of control. She often thought of herself as having poodle hair, naturally curly and untamable. One of the locals needs me to do some dog walking for him the rest of the week.
Don't worry. Your veterinary business will pick up.
Allie had known small-town Willow Bluff wouldn't be as busy as Madison when it came to needing veterinary services, but the current pace was slower than she'd expected. She'd been there for 6 weeks, but it felt more like 6 years.